All right, welcome everybody back to another episode of the Big Douglas Show. This is one of my favorites. We do a couple times each year. NFL Insider Benjamin Allbright. Benjamin, how have you been?
I'm doing pretty well. About yourself?
Doing well. This is for Commanders fans. This is our favorite time of year. It's off, and we're looking at the next. We'll get to the Commanders, obviously, but before then, I'm curious some of your thoughts on some of the other positions, open coaching spots. Last year, you had EB to the Commanders first. What will EB do this year? It's so odd. I mean, is he going to get another job this year?
I think you will. We'll sort of see how that shakes out. There's a possibility. Let's see. I don't want to give too much away just yet. We'll get into it a little bit, but I think there's a possibility of what would amount to a de facto trade. It wouldn't actually be a trade at all, but it would be two OCs swapping spots, and I think you can kind of connect the dots on where I'm going with this already.
Very interesting. We switched from that. It looks like maybe it's Belichick to the Falcons. On its face, it doesn't feel like a fit. What are you hearing there in Atlanta?
That's been something both sides have been angling toward for a while. If that doesn't get done, that'll be the Falcons fumbling the bag on that one. That's I'm not going to say it's gonna happen, but it's on the verge of happening. Is probably the best way to put that. And that's been in the works for a little while. I know Washington flirted around with the idea of Belichick. They kind of looked into it a little bit, but that ultimately not the direction you guys want to go. You guys want to go with a young OC. With Belichick, I think he thinks he can win with the division down there. That it's a pretty soft division. And he wants to break Don Shula's all-time record, and I think he feels like that probably gives him the best opportunity to do that. They've got an early draft pick. They've got a situation where they can kind of pick and choose their quarterback, and there's some pieces there. I mean, you've got some offensive pieces between Pitts and Robinson and London, and and then on the defensive side, that defense might be a little bit underrated. Honestly, Atlanta's defense is not that bad. So I think that when you look at all things considered, I think Arthur Blank understands what it is that he's doing here, and I think that they're going to get that done.
You think this has as much to do with Arthur Blank wanting to be or have a piece of the history that will come with Belichick breaking the record in the Falcons?
I think it's an added bonus. I don't know that he necessarily has a piece of it, but I think it's sort of an added bonus type thing, especially because Tom Brady did his own thing in the division, with the Bucks. So I think that there's I don't want to call it owner's envy there, but I think there's a little bit of that in there.
Assuming they will not go with Rattler, do you think they'll make a move for Field? Well, let's do this. What do you think the Bears will do at one?
I think they'll draft Caleb Williams. They'll trade Justin Fields and draft Caleb Williams. And I know that there are people out there saying that they're going to hang on to Justin Fields. Everyone unanimously that I've talked to believes that they are trading Justin Fields. So generally, when that happens, when I don't have a single person who believes that they're keeping him, generally that means that they're moving him.
What is the value for Fields at this point?
Not very high. Everybody I've talked to says the absolute maximum that they're going to get is like the Alex Smith 2 second rounders kind of thing. That's if somebody gets desperate, you get two teams in a bidding war. But most of them don't believe that that's going to be the case. Most of them believe it's something like a 2 and a 4, 2 and a 5 is probably the realistic price for Justin Fields.
And that's because you've got to turn around soon and give him 30, 35, 40 million.
Combination of things. I mean, one, he's not that good. If we're being honest, he's an athletic marvel, but as a passer, it's not been good. It's not all been the offensive line or the receivers either. He's just not been that good. The turnaround that Chicago had at the end of the season wasn't because of Justin Fields. I mean, he had his normal bad numbers. It was the defense in Chicago all of a sudden getting a lot better. And so that's not to say that Justin can't turn into something. It's not to say the offense wasn't holding back. It's just saying that he has not been good today. He's something like 8-27 as a starter, and that's not on the supporting cast in the offense. Part of that's you at some point, And so I think that around the league, he's viewed a little bit lower than perhaps fans and media view him.
What will they do? We talked a little bit briefly about Atlanta. I can't imagine you're rolling Ritter out there as the first QB1 next year. What do you think they'll look to do there?
I think they'll bring in a veteran, and I would not be surprised if that veteran was Russell Wilson. Once Russell Wilson gets cut, He's going to wind up playing next year on a veteran minimum deal. And the reason that he'll do that is because he has offset language with the Broncos. And so he's not going to make, charging his new team any more money isn't going to make him any money. He's still going to get the same amount because it's offset from the Broncos. So why wouldn't you stick it to Denver, have them paying most of your contract out while you play on a like a $1.6 million veteran minimum type deal, for Atlanta or whomever. But Atlanta, I think, would be in play, especially with Belichick there. I'm not 100% sure that's any kind of like done deal, but I think they would be one of the teams that's in play.
Correct me if I'm wrong. When we talked last year this time, you were not the world's largest Sean Payton fan. Where do you stand with what he's done and how the Broncos are heading?
Well, I think that Payton has instilled a professional culture in Denver, which was largely non-existent with the previous staff and Nathaniel Hackett. So I want to give him credit there. I don't particularly. I get a little weirded out when people talk about offensive genius or any of that, because we certainly didn't see any of that. And if you're a person that was watching what Russell Wilson did this year, you're kind of probably annoyed at Sean Payton, because Sean tried to square peg round hole Russell Wilson for 3/4 of football, and then when they finally cut him loose, he was hyper productive, which has been the story of Russell Wilson his entire career. So I think if you're gonna have Russell Wilson, you have to understand that freelancing and working outside of structure, playing up tempo, and a little bit more backyard football is probably going to be the way you're going to be successful. Whereas trying to shoehorn him into a system that he doesn't work in is just going to make him look bad. And that's what we wound up with. I'm not the world's biggest Sean Payton fan. I mean, he's the head coach of the Denver Broncos right now, so I really don't. I have to cover that, but. I'm not the biggest fan. It doesn't mean he can't. Doesn't mean he's not a good coach. Doesn't mean he won't win. It's just I'm not the biggest fan.
Russell Wilson had some of his biggest years with Canales down there, who is in Tampa Bay now. Surprised he's not getting more mentions. Do you think he'll get a job this cycle?
Canales, he's had a few interviews. I think he needs one more, one more cycle kind of. There are some people that are, just the eyeball in that, but I think that's one of those guys. Like there are guys that, you kind of eyeball after one season. You're like, okay, next cycle is his cycle. And then there are guys like, for instance, Bobby Slowick, who you're like, okay, that guy's getting a job, like if he wants one. Same thing with Ben Johnson, kind of last year, like that guy's getting a job if he wants one. So, I like Canales a lot. Met him 2 or 3 times. He's very, very good at what he does. Been around the league a long time. I believe he'll be a head coach in this league. I just don't believe this is his cycle. Will
we see Jim Harbaugh in the NFL next year?
I think so. I think that Chargers thing is just about done. They've got a whole lot of names that are on their list. They're still going to talk through, and they interviewed David Shaw yesterday. Shaw would be a potential staff ad for Harbaugh anyway. So a lot of the interviews that they're doing at this point, I think some of them are staff ads and not necessarily actually head coaching interviews. I think the Chargers are viewing this as a situation where you're trying to add value to a franchise that I think the Spanos are going to sell here in about 5 or 6 years. And I think that's what they're trying to do. I think they're willing to spend right now where they've never been willing to spend, because they want to add value to the franchise and maximize their dollar when they sell here. And, once the ban on sale gets lifted here, what is it, 5 years, 6 years? So.
You think that the Raiders were the other viable option there? Do you think they would have pursued Harbaugh harder if at least the team hadn't said that they wanted Pierce? And you think Pierce will be the guy there now?
I do. Oh, excuse me. I think that, and I think that it would have too. I think they would have been more overt in their pursuit there, because I think, Mark Davis wants to make a splash, but I think he's sort of got his legs cut out from under him here, because the locker room really wants Antonio Pierce, and they know they messed up the last time they didn't hire the interim coach in Bisaccia, and they went out and made the splash and got Josh McDaniels, and that blew up in their face. So I think that, I'm firmly in the camp that you probably almost never want to hire the interim head coach. But in this particular case, he's kind of earned it. He's got the locker room. You could do it on the cheap, and you're already paying 2 coaches in addition to whomever you hire in Josh McDaniels and John Gruden. So, this might be a situation where it ends up saving Mark Davis a little in the wallet.
And they had to pay a lot of money just to get to Vegas, right? Like, I mean, he's got a lot of cash going out.
Yeah, they've got more cash inflow than they've ever had, but they've got a lot of outflow as well, with all the moving costs, stadium and all that kind of stuff. So that's a situation where, once they get out from under the Gruden and McDaniels contracts, they'll be a little better off. But right now they're not.
Vrabel was out with the Titans. It surprised me. I think he's one of the better coaches in the league. I know he might not be exactly what teams are going for now with the young coordinators. What ended up happening in Tennessee, and who will be the next head coach there, do you think?
Well, I think they wanted to change. I think they want to go young offensive mind. I think they've looked around the division and said, okay, everybody else has made changes and they're on the upswing. What about us? I think they made the wrong move in getting rid of Vrabel. I do, but they did. So I think that they're a team. I think that's going to be heavily in pursuit of Bobby Slowick. They know what he is across the division. I think that'll, in their eyes, I think that'll help them. We'll kind of see how that shakes out. Dan Quinn's apparently in play there as well, but we'll kind of see. Mike Vrabel, what went wrong? You had a general manager prior to the current one who didn't know what he was doing,
Yes.
and basically traded away the good pieces, and it just it became an untenable situation. I mean, they never wanted to. Mike Vrabel never wanted to trade AJ Brown for and then draft Treylon Burks with that pick. He never wanted to do it, and it blew up in their faces. And John Robinson's not there anymore. They got Rand Carthen. Carthen has a relationship with Bobby Slowick dating back to their days in San Francisco. So I think that's ultimately what happens with Vrabel. He may take a DC job this year. I don't think he's going to get a head gig. I think if Philly or if Dallas had come open, he would have been the front of the line there. I know people talked about Belichick, but that wasn't going to happen. I think Vrabel would have been the front of the line there. I'm not sure where he gets a job. Maybe Seattle if they pass on Quinn, or if Quinn takes a Tennessee job or something like that. But I feel like he's probably either a DC or 1 year off football before he gets back into the head coaching arena, and someone will hire him as a head coach next year.
Which one surprised you more, Belichick or Carroll?
Neither really. I knew about the Belichick stuff, God, since late October, and then the Pete Carroll rumors. I mean, those have been pervasive for a while, that he was going to retire, or that kind of thing, or air quotes retire. So neither one of those were really super surprising to me. I'd listed both on Twitter as certainly as possibilities. I think the biggest surprise to me was Vrabel, was Tennessee making that move, when I'm like, if it's me, we reset with a new OC, bring in like a Liam Cohen and go from there. But that was probably the bigger surprise for me.
Were you surprised that the Bears didn't hit reset? I know they started playing well down the stretch. I get that. It almost feels like if you're doing this, you've got to give him at least a year or two, right? I mean, that kind of was the problem. Listen, there were many problems in Washington, but part of the problem was whoever came in as the OC probably only had 1 year. What are they doing in Chicago? I was surprised they didn't hit a hard reset with the number 1 pick.
A little bit surprised there. In mid-season, I was told it was going to happen, that they were going to move on from Eberflus at that point. But the defense, man, once they made the Sweat trade, that defense really started coming together. And I think Eberflus's voice in the building saying, look, I need more pass rushers to make this scheme work. I need more pressure, or else the scheme isn't going to work. They get the guy, and and all of a sudden it works. I think that resonated. And like I said, down the stretch, the defense looked pretty good. Mm-hmm. So I think that they understand they're going to be drafting a quarterback at the top. They understand they've got all these draft picks and everything else. And I think they're going to try their best to make his scheme work and go from there. And, he'll get a season to make that, turn it around with a new OC and go from there. If it doesn't work, then they'll be on to a new head coach. And I think they'll have a line of people probably wanting to work with Caleb Williams.
Who do you think the OC will be in Chicago?
Oh, that's a good question. I think Liam Cohen, or Shane Waldron are probably the guy. So I think that's probably the case. I mean, there's some interesting names in there. Greg Roman was if we keep Justin Fields move. I know the Cliff Kingsbury interview, but I don't even think it's a real interview. I think it's a scouting session. So I think Cohen or Waldron, but I don't sleep on a Marcus Brady who's got relationships to that staff. I think those are probably the names to watch.
Will both of the Ravens coordinators get head coaching gigs this cycle?
I'm not sure either gets a gig this cycle.
Really?
Both of them will get jobs at some point, whether that's this year or next year. Todd Monken, I think Carolina's probably his best bet. And then Tennessee, I think is McDonald's best bet. But I'm not sure either one of them get a job. Monken, I lean like, if he can wow them with second interview in Carolina, that he could be the guy down there. He knows the division. He's got ties to the area, all that kind of stuff. That one to me feels more real. McDonald, like I said, he'll get a job eventually. It just doesn't feel like this is his year.
All right, let's do a little Commander stuff. Were you surprised by the Peters hiring and how quickly it happened?
No, not at all. Not even a little bit. That was the guy. That was the guy there all along. I mean, I know what's his face. Cunningham had a good interview, but Peters was the guy. And Peters has been in multiple successful cultures. I saw him out here in Denver. He was a guy probably should have got a GM job before now, to be honest with you. But finally gets a job. I think he's going to be very good at what he does. He's patient, has a good eye for talent. So I think he's going to be a successful general manager. Not surprised by that at all. And I think that sort of tips the hand on what it is that they're trying to do at head coach.
And you think that'll be Ben? It seems like Ben Johnson. I mean, the dots kind of take you to Slowick, but from everything you hear, it's Johnson.
Yeah, everything I've heard is Ben Johnson. I mean, they'll interview Slowick and all that kind of stuff, but I think it's going to be Ben Johnson. I just do. And I think that that's going to be a good fit. I think that's going to be a good pick. You guys are going to get faster on offense. That's going to be sort of the thing, is bringing in speed. I mean, you've got some pieces already, but it'll be bringing in some more speed. You saw what they did up there in Detroit. And then getting the quarterback. And I think that's going to be Drake May right there in the draft at number 2. I think it's going to fall right in your lap. So Ben will get a chance to work with the quarterback. He'll get a chance to build that team in his own image. And I think that's the direction that's headed.
One of the biggest things about head coaching, and I'm not sure it gets talked about enough, is the ability to be able to put a staff together. It feels like if you're looking at all these candidates, Raheem Morris probably has the ability to put together the best staff just because of his connections. What kind of staff do you think Ben Johnson can put together?
Well, that's going to be sort of interesting. What it is that he does, because I think that's the big question mark with regard to him, is what kind of staff is he going to put together? Who is he going to bring in? There's a couple names out there I've heard and all that kind of stuff, but that's one thing I don't have a ton of insight into. I don't like, especially on the defensive side of the ball, who he's going to be married up with, those kinds of things. So it'll be interesting. That's one of those things. I just don't have a lot of intel on what a staff for him is going to look like in this particular situation. I know some of the offensive pieces, but the defensive side of the ball, I just don't. You mentioned Raheem Moore, and yeah, he is a guy who I think deserves a head coaching job. It's going to be interesting to see if anybody will hire him this cycle. He's a guy who's worked both sides of the ball. And I'm a big fan. He's got experience too, but it's just tough. I mean, you look at the way that this carousel's going out here. Atlanta was probably his best shot, and it's probably going to wind up going to Belichick.
And did you say who you thought would end up with the head coaching gig in Seattle?
I think it's going to be Dan Quinn. I think the second favorite there is Mike Vrabel, but I think it's probably going to be Dan Quinn.
Were you surprised they didn't make changes in Dallas? Well, how about this? Do you think there was a bigger chance that Dallas moved on or Philly moved on? Because I kind of thought maybe that Sirianni would be done with an early exit. They fell apart at the end.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised neither team made a move, and just knowing, with Lurie, they were going to give Sirianni another shot because he got the coordinators right the first time. In Dallas, Jerry doesn't want to admit he's wrong,
Yep.
And so that's sort of the thing. Quinn takes a job, they get to kind of reset on defense. You probably bring in like a Mike Zimmer to run that defense and look a little different. But no, not really. I mean, everybody was talking about it, but Jerry, for his hot-headed as he is and all that kind of stuff, like, this is one of those things where he doesn't want to be hot-headed and wrong. So I think they run it back one more time, and you sort of get the built-in excuse and a chance to kind of work on everything for a year rather than have to do this in a rush this year off something you didn't expect.
Dak's going to get 55 some million. At what point do we have to put, like, as an NFL collectively, do we have to figure out how to cap the number so that the point is having a good quarterback? But I think where I'm going with this. You just can't afford to pay quarterbacks $50 million a year, can you?
I don't think you'll ever have a cap, and the reason is quarterback thirst. Teams are so thirsty that you're always going to have an owner break ranks to go get a guy and overpay, and that's the cost of doing business. You either have a quarterback on a rookie deal or you're paying market rate. Like there's just no in between. Occasionally you'll find teams that try to cut costs or cut corners. You probably see the Broncos do that this year because you're dealing with the weight of the Russell Wilson cut or coming cut. So you'll probably see the Broncos try to do that, but it's rarely successful. So it's going to be one of those things where, if you've got a guy and you believe in him, you just got to pay him. That's the cost of doing business, and you're not going to be able to find a way for anyone to tamp that down because if you don't pay him, somebody will. Someone is desperate enough that they will, thinking that's the piece. That's unfortunately with the quarterback position, that's the problem.
You mentioned Drake May to Washington. That seems like the right. How do you think the league evaluates the 4 or 5 guys that are going to go in the first round?
Well, I think there's 3 sure things, and I say sure things to go in the first round, not sure things as far as NFL prospects. And that's Caleb Williams, Drake May, and Jaden Daniels. Those guys are going to go 1, 2, 3, and I think that's pretty much a done deal. After that, it's a giant question mark. I've talked to people around the league, and depending on who you ask, the next quarterback is either Bo Nix or JJ McCarthy. McCarthy's got more upside, way younger, got kind of the upside. I think Nix is just kind of is what he is. I think Nix is kind of a lot closer to maybe like a Derek Carr than people think. And so I think that's the thing. I don't know if either one of those 2 guys go in the first round. I mean, you could see only 3 quarterbacks go in the first, maybe 4, maybe 5. But I think that next tier of guys, which ostensibly includes Michael Penix, although the league is much lower on him. I think they go later, like into the second round, even. Maybe they sneak in late first. What's that?
Explain why the league is a little bit lower on Penix, because I got people all the time saying Penix should be higher. He's going to wow people when they see the arm. But I'm with you. I think a lot of people are not high on Penix.
Yeah, he was kind of the system guy in Washington. When he played in Indiana, he really wasn't a good quarterback or passer. He does not throw the ball well over the middle of the field when he even bothers to throw it over the middle of the field. He had elite talent around him on the outside with Rome, wide receiver over there. He's a guy that struggles with pressure. If you look at any time he had to hold the ball or anytime he had pressure, he struggled to decipher the field. He had 4 season-ending injuries, including an AC joint on the throwing shoulder and 2 ACLs. There's a medical issue. There's a lot going on there. And that's not to say Michael Penix isn't a good college quarterback. I think he's the epitome of what a college quarterback should be. But in terms of being an NFL prospect, it's a different set of criterion. And I don't think much of his NFL prospects, and people I've talked to around the league. They're not really, he's one of those guys you take a flyer on, if he's there in the 3rd or 4th round, not a guy you build a team around.
See, and it's crazy to me that Bo Nix is starting to get so much of that love. I know he had big years at Oregon, but he had some not very good years at Auburn. I get people grow and all these things, but I try to decipher. I've been trying to decipher for a couple of months now. Where does the meet the road between Auburn and Oregon? It makes me nervous if I'm picking Bo Nix.
Yeah, I think with Nix, it's NFL tools and size and all that kind of stuff. Although he's old too. He and Penix are both old. They'll be 24 years old as rookies. I think it's more about you see a guy who has the NFL mindset. He's willing to just dump it down. He's willing to take what a defense will give him, that kind of stuff. And I think coaches in the NFL are risk averse, right? And I think that they like low variance guys like that. And they think, oh, Bo Nix is going to come in here and be like Derek Carr. There's not going to be a lot of turnovers. He's going to make the safe play. I can work with that. And I can coach him up on how to make the big plays when we need him, that sort of thing. I think he's viewed more that way than anything else. And I think that's what sets him maybe a little bit more apart, that and the lack of injury.
Let's run through some of the games this weekend. Let's start with the Texans-Ravens. Who you like in this game?
Baltimore. I mean, Texans are a great story, but that defense is a whole other animal. And I can't see the Texans walking out of that one. They would have to have a major defensive performance and shut down Lamar, and then find a way to score against probably the best defense in football this year in the Ravens. So I think Baltimore is the number 1 seed for a reason, and I believe they'll win.
It's amazing how much better Lamar's looked in that Monken offense. It's been nice to see him get the keys to an actual offense and go out there and run it. We break down the film each Tuesday that we've been going through potential coaching candidates. We did McDonald last week. That defense is nasty and they fly. Communication is crazy. Like they rotate those safeties in a way that I haven't seen really it done that way. And it was interesting to break down the film. They do some wild stuff over there. Let's see. Packers 49ers. I think this is an easy one too, right? That Packers team deserves a lot of credit there, right?
Oh, absolutely. Especially for coming in and stunning a Dallas team. A lot of people didn't see that coming. There were some things there, I think, that played in their favor. Number one, LaFleur had worked on Dan Quinn's staff before and kind of knows what he does. Number two, the Cowboys don't have any linebackers. They're playing a 205-pound safety as a linebacker. And you got Aaron Jones, you can just run on it. And I think the combination of those two things really helped them out. I like LaFleur as a coach. I think he's a great play caller. But I think he's up against his mentor who knows what he does in Kyle Shanahan. And, I think that 49ers buzzsaw is going to be a little too much for him. So we'll see. If the Packers get a lead early, that could present a problem. That's the kryptonite to that offense. And we've seen it not just in San Francisco, but in Miami. Anybody who runs that offense, you get down 2 scores quick and they abandon the run game and they become one-dimensional. It's easier to beat them. So we'll see. Packers get out to a big lead, they got a chance. Otherwise, San Francisco rolls.
It's been interesting. It feels like for the last couple of years, we've watched the league kind of poo-poo the linebacker position and devalue it. And it's just interesting that the 2-1 seeds here have something in common, and the linebacker play is out of this world. Bucks Lions might be one of the more interesting games of the weekend. What do you see in this one?
Well, I feel like you guys are going to be watching this one, right? I think you've got a reason to watch. Detroit is their offense is loaded with talent, loaded with speed. I got a chance. I was up in Detroit for the Broncos game, got to watch that thing firsthand. That offense is fast. I'll say that. I think I'm going to be rooting for the Buccaneers because I kind of got Baker mania here. But I would not be surprised if the Lions won that game. They're at home. They're playing with emotion. Dan Campbell's got a bead on how to use that. I think they're the more talented team on the offensive side of the ball. Defensively, the Bucs are a better team. So it's really just going to come down to the play, probably of Jared Goff. If Goff has a good Jared Goff day, they win. If he's Goffle, then they lose. And I think that's end of the day, I think that's the difference in that game. I'm gonna be pulling for Tampa, but we'll see how it goes.
Goff's been really good, and I'm not sure he gets enough credit for. I think he's kind of like the man that everybody just assumes is part of some system or part of McVay's system. And I get all that. I understand that's an easy comp, but Goff's been really good in Detroit. And I'm not sure they thought they were getting this when they made that trade. I mean, I think they wanted a quarterback, but he's been better than he was with LA, don't you think?
Yeah, and here's an interesting note. If you look at the stats, he and Matt Stafford have almost identical stat lines since they got traded for each other.
Okay.
Their stat lines are almost identical. So, Goff has really been the key that helps turn that engine. He's had some down stretches. We saw one of those earlier this year, but he's really been the key on that.
And we get one more from the Chiefs and the Bills. You got to love this matchup. It's a different type of matchup, right? Where the Chiefs kind of are in this thing with their defense instead of the offense.
Yeah, it's weird. The Chiefs are a defensive identity team right now, and frankly, so are the Bills. They fired their offensive coordinator, hired Joe Brady. The offense stayed the same, but the defense got better. I think this is going to be a fun game. I lean Buffalo a little bit in this one, even with Kansas City's experience and Andy Reid. I think Buffalo played down to the level of competition at times this year, but I just feel like they've got a little too much offense probably for Kansas City. If Kansas City gets down, I'm not sure that those receivers are going to be able to help Mahomes enough to make it work.
You think, and it's awful early, but do you think we'll get chalk for the Super Bowl this year?
Yeah, I mean, I put a ticket in on Buffalo San Fran at the start of the playoffs, so I suspect that's probably the matchup we'll have. A rematch of the Harbaugh Bowl from a few years back, although obviously Harbaugh is not in San Francisco anymore. So we'll see, but I think that's a likely outcome.
And last one, I know you've been on with Jay Gruden before. Are you loving the war that we're having on X right now?
Yeah. Yeah, here's the thing about that is that it's kind of fun because everybody's kind of seeing this, but RG3 I think probably does not want I think there are, like, everybody thinks there are more skeletons in Jay Gruden's closet, but there are more skeletons in RG3's closet, and I think RG3 probably needs to, like, not continue to push that button, because there are, it's not just Jay Gruden being nice. It's other coaches that worked with RG3 that aren't saying anything online right now that I think would come out and say some things. And so it's fun and funny for a couple of rounds, but I think both those guys probably need to lay the guns down, because at this point, you're at the point where it doesn't do anything but damage each other's brand.
That's right. Benjamin, I always appreciate this, man. You're the best. A lot of people get information they're not always willing to share it, and you do, and I appreciate it.
No worries, man. Anytime.
All right. Thanks, bud.